One Question is brought to you by Turnkey Search, a top industry search firm since 1996. NFCA Executive Director Carol Bruggeman is on One Question today. And Coach Bruggeman, we are one day past the epic 17-inning Game 1 affair between Oklahoma and Florida last night in the Women's College World Series out in Oklahoma City. We're headed into Game 2 tonight at 8 p.m., so don't quite know the outcome, obviously, of the series yet. But let's just start with a broad perspective on the state of college softball.
Well, sure, and Matt, you're absolutely right. The follow-up from that epic matchup was that we had our highest overnight rating ever. And so, that leads me to probably the best answer I have for you is just the overall growth in the sport of fast-pitch softball over the past few years. It's been a sport that's been on the steady incline for many, many years, and I think over the past 5 years you've seen this massive explosion in the number of high school teams added across the country, in the number of travel ball and club teams added across the country, and then that has led to more collegiate programs across the country. It's a very popular sport. It's a very fast-paced, exciting sport. I think you see the level of athletes. If there's one thing I get asked all the time, it's the high level of athleticism now that you see in our players across the country. They used to gravitate in high school toward one or two sports, and now maybe a basketball, maybe a volleyball, that sort of thing. And although we still have a lot of athletes gravitating toward those sports, and they're great sports as well, we see a ton of players gravitating towards softball strictly because of the level of athleticism and the popularity of the sport. But, growth is the number one word that comes to mind. Growth at the high school level, club level, college level, growth in the amount of softball facilities and stadiums across the country, growth in the amount of people who are making coaching fast-pitch softball their profession at any level, and just growth in the exposure of our sport via television, live streaming, whatever it might be. And I think that's also led, Matt, to a huge educational explosion in the sport of fast-pitch softball. The attendance at the NFCA and other coaches clinics across the country are very highly attended. It's like people can't get enough of our sport and how to teach it and how to become better. Growth at our convention, and really just growth watching the sport of softball. If you turn on the TV and you watch the NCAA regionals at the Division I level, you see sold-out stadiums at all 16 sites across the country. So people are attending in person as well as watching on TV. So probably growth is my best answer, and it's an exciting time to be associated with the sport.
I'm glad you mentioned the TV ratings from last night, and a number of really notable sports media journalists out there. Richard Deitsch with Sports Illustrated Sports TV Ratings, which is a very popular Twitter handle. They have both remarked over the last week or two about the power of softball ratings on TV compared to some other sports programming. And we know with the landscape and where it's going, live sports tends to over-index compared to virtually any other form of programming right now. And so women's softball right now is in a really, really good spot. And we're going to see more. You mentioned growth, but we should see more with the coming of the ACC network on the linear side, as well as more digital options coming. So that's certainly an exciting story to tell. I've got a question about coming out of the regionals this year, Carol. We saw all 16, if I'm kind of going off memory here, but I'm thinking we saw all 16 hosts advance, which seemed a little odd to me. Is there any view of parity right now in the Division I landscape being lopsided in any capacity?
I think it's extremely odd. I saw a statistic, and I'm not going to be exact on it, but someone went back and looked at the men's basketball Final Four to see when the last time all top 16 seeds, advanced to the Sweet 16. They looked at women's basketball, volleyball. They looked at all different sports. And it was something like 2 or 3 times in the history of all of those sports has it ever happened that the 16 seeds have advanced as they did in Division I softball this year. So I think, number one, it's just kind of a rare and odd thing. But in terms of parity, I don't think we've ever seen as much parity as we've had at the Division I level. There were several teams at the tops of the polls this year, so it's not one team that started as the preseason favorite and stayed there all year and then ended number one. really in all of our divisions, whether it's Division I, Division II, Division III. We've seen that across the board. I think you also see the amount of teams. There's not many teams out there, very, very few teams out there that have less than 10 losses on a season when you're playing 50, 60 games a season. So there's just tremendous parity across the country. It makes it exciting, and I think that's a big reason why people like to watch is nothing's guaranteed. You know, you turn on some other NCAA championship sports, some that are even on TV, and when the top seed is beating the lower seed by 50 points or more, or whatever it might be, you know, that's not as good for the sport as it is when you turn on a regional at the Division I level on TV. And you know, you saw it with North Dakota State in the Norman Regional, upset Oklahoma in the first game of the regional, and they've had to play from behind and play elimination games all the way up, and now here they are fighting for a national championship. So that just shows you the parity in our sport. I think a lot of it has to do with the high quality of athletes that are now across the country. You know, it used to be in a few states where there was a very high level of athlete, and now in all 50 states you can find high-level athletes on high-level rosters, and really in rosters of sports of all divisions across the country, but specifically Division I. And that has led to teams being able to develop very quickly and offer scholarships to those high-level athletes, and then you put enough of those on a team, you can compete with anybody in the country. So it makes it fun to watch. You know, it was really fun last night. I had so many people text me that, and I have to give a shout-out to Meg Aronowitz, who's a coordinating producer for ESPN, who does a fantastic job with the sport of fast-pitch softball and really has been a huge part of the growth with the ESPN networks with softball. But for the first time, I had so many texts from people who said, I can't believe they've moved Major League Baseball from ESPN to ESPN2 to keep the softball game on. And I think that just shows you right there. Last year, the Women's College World Series outdrew the Baseball College World Series by an astronomical amount. So, you know, it's a fun sport to watch. It's a fast-paced sport. We're trying to do everything we can on our end in terms of working together with our coaches to make sure our rules still reflect the high-level pace of the game, but safety still being paramount. You know, we try to do a good job with our coaches in developing educational programs with our fast-pitch college courses and our podcasts and our, of course, our convention, and we have coaches clinics. We're trying to do everything we can to make sure that the latest and greatest information is out there. And I tell you one thing, Matt, if I had to pick one separating factor of softball with all the other sports and why we've grown so much is that our highest level coaches, our most successful coaches, are not afraid to share what they do at practice, what their techniques are, what their strategies are. They're the first people to speak at our coaches clinics to all the grassroots coaches across the country. They're the first people to speak at our convention. We're a very sharing sport. We compete like heck between the lines, but our sport, we're not afraid to share, and I think that's led to a lot of growth. There's not a lot of secrets, and I think that's really helped our sport overall. So I can't thank our highest level coaches enough, and really all the coaches out there aren't afraid to share their drills and their practice plans and their strategies, because I think that's helped lead to our tremendous amount of growth as well.
You know, that you've made a couple of interesting points there, one of which is, yes, all 16 regional hosts advanced this year, which is odd, but it is a small sample size. It's just 1 year. And we're looking at an example in North Dakota State who beat Oklahoma. And Oklahoma's one win away from winning the whole thing. So right. Those are two interesting, pretty interesting examples. I'm curious, as the sport of fast pitch clearly is gaining more traction with general sports interest eyeballs around the nation and fans. Do you think there's a time, and maybe we're already there, Carol, where the coaching contracts for a lot of these Division I head coaches are going to mirror or already mirror their baseball counterparts and or other sports? And to a degree, as the visibility of fast pitch continues to accelerate, could we see them be under the same types of short-term pressures that some of the revenue generation sports are under in terms of tenure length and frankly, demand for winning and producing at a high level?
Well, Matt, I think we're already there. There's no question we're already there. We're already there in terms of the pressures, the short-term pressures. the short shelf life, as I like to call it, in college athletics. It can be. There's no question. The more you're given, the more is expected. So when you build a $17 million stadium and you have 3 full-time coaches, paying a very good living, as they should, they deserve it. As you see that go across the board, you certainly have seen a tremendous amount of turnover in our sport in the last 5 years, more than you did in probably the last 10 combined, just because of that, the pressures and the expectations of Division I college athletics. There's no question. But everybody that gets into the sport understands that, and it's the tough part of the job, but there's so many other rewards to the job that, a lot of coaches accept that responsibility. In terms of the coaches' contracts, I think we're far, far behind. Believe it or not, I would go on a limb here and say half of the coaches, the Division I coaches in the country, we have 297 Division I programs. There's only about 20 that don't out there at the Division I level. I would go on a limb and say half of those coaches don't have a contract, or if they do have a contract, it's a 1-year contract, renewable every year. So that's pressure right in and of itself when you have a 1-year contract. But certainly at the higher levels or at the softball programs that have traditionally strong softball programs, the BCS level, whatever it might be, a lot of those coaches do have longer-term contracts, but as you mentioned, are not near what the baseball coach is making at that particular school. It just depends on the individual institution. But, I hope we get there. We do have some coaches like Patty Gasso at Oklahoma who aren't afraid to talk about their contract. She's one of the highest paid and so deserving. But the better she does and the more that institution is committed to the sport of softball, that helps coaches across the country. But again, that information has to be shared amongst the coaches. But I think we're a long way away in the contract department. I think we're getting there. Our highest coaches are pushing that envelope, and that's helping all the college softball coaches across the country. But in terms of the turnover and pressures and that sort of thing, there's no question that we're already there, and we're seeing that with the tremendous amount of turnover annually at a lot of the programs.
Mm-hmm. And looking forward, your convention this year for 2017 is out in Vegas in early December. What are some key items on your roadmap in preparation for that get-together, and really where the sport's going and how the NFCA can help it get there?
Well, our convention is our marquee event for sure. We do events all year long, and in-person events, online events, all the time. But our convention is our marquee item. We set attendance records last year, over 1,600 attendees. We had a sold-out exhibit show, so we're very excited about Las Vegas. We certainly hope to break those records again. But when we head into the convention, we try to be all things softball to all people, and as you know, that's a challenge because you have all divisions in attendance. Certainly Division I always drives the ship, but we have valued input from all of our divisions and our exhibits and sponsors who have just continue to pour a lot of resources into the sport of softball, all under one roof. We call it the greatest softball show on earth. So as we move into the convention, certainly education is the number one goal of people attending, so we try to bring in a variety of speakers on a variety of topics. And various formats, whether it's one speaker in front of 1,600 people or it's roundtable topics in front of 20, and there's a rotation. We do a lot of educational items. We have a mentoring program. Again, that goes back to the sport of softball sharing, where we have mentors. It's one of our highest attended events at the convention. Some experienced coaches will sit at a table with some inexperienced coaches and share ideas, and we rotate through over a 2-hour period, and we have a huge pay it forward event at the end of the night where coaches can donate, and we turn right around and take all the money we raise at that event and give it right back that night to the people in attendance for future educational classes. So kind of takes sharing to a new level. We also have various business meetings and caucuses where Division I coaches and all the other divisions get together and talk about issues in their sport. We're in a new rules cycle this year, so our rules committee is meeting right after the Women's College World Series, reviewing all the proposals from coaches across the country, They'll narrow it down to their major rule changes and send it back out to the coaches for their final feedback before the rules committee makes a final decision. But our rule book is on a 2-year cycle, and so we'll have a new rule book next year for the next 2 years. We also do a lot of awards at our convention. It's the time of year to recognize, regional coaching staffs of the year, national coaching staffs of the year, Victory Club award winners when coaches reach milestones, and of course the pinnacle, our Hall of Fame. We induct, anywhere from 2 to 4 members into our NFCA Hall of Fame at our convention. So it's a good mix of exhibit show, seeing the latest and greatest equipment out there. The equipment companies like to get to the decision makers in softball, and there's no better place than our convention to do that. We talk a lot of business, the state of the game, the rules of the game, the championships. We talk a lot about that. And then we certainly have a lot of awards events and a lot of educational events, and cap off the night with various social events, sponsored events from our vendors.
And that's today's One Question, brought to you by Turnkey Search, a top industry search firm since 1996. One Question is designed to give D1 Ticker subscribers valuable insights on how executive leaders in college athletics think about key issues on their respective campuses, in their departments, or within their leagues and conferences. One Question is brought to you by Turnkey Search, a top industry search firm since 1996.